Welcome back to the Punishment Prairie. So I read Invisible Planets, which is an anthology of contemporary Chinese science fiction, edited and translated by Ken Liu. Liu Cixin's name is like front and center, given top billing. He has 2 stories in the anthology. Unfortunately, they are, I think you can probably predict how I feel about them. If you've seen the 3-Body Problem review, this is not an exception, but the rest of it is great. I love this book. This is really strong material, especially from a writer called Chen Qiufan. Qiufan wrote the first 3 stories in the book. They're all really good. They're increasingly good. The first one's about people hunting rats in a post-apocalyptic future, mutant rats. The second one is about a man going on holiday to a town run by robots. And then the third one is this amazing slice of cyberpunk writing about a man working in a shop selling skin grafts that have not biofeedback, that's for stress management, but like works in a shop selling techno tchotchkes and finds himself in kind of a noir plot. It's so good. It's really, 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 really good. The book that is coming up next in this video is Qiufan's novel called Waist Tide that I read immediately after this book that I liked, especially in the first half. I didn't like it as much as the short stories, which are some of my favorite science fiction short stories that I've certainly read that were published relatively recently. I think most of these were published in the late 2000s, early aughts. I don't really recall. I like Qiufan's writing because I feel like he has taken what is good in cyberpunk and kept it relevant and used it in a way that feels contemporary without feeling derivative, without feeling like he's doing pastiche to Gibson or whoever. And I'm consistently impressed by the maturity of his writing, especially these short stories. The sampling of stuff that I've read from Qiufan has impressed me to the point that I would say he's probably one of my favorite contemporary science fiction writers. Most of the material in here is really good, way above average. The stories that follow Chen Qiufan are written by Xia Jia. Xia Jia wrote 100 Ghosts, Parade Tonight, Tong Tong Summer, and Night Journey of the Dragon Horse. I'm trying to remember which one it is, but one of these is just amazing. Reads like a Miyazaki movie about a boy raised in a town of ghosts who put on a parade every year where the townspeople are chased by this giant ogre thing. Really, really, really good stuff. I like basically everything in this book except for a couple of stories. One is called The City of Silence by Ma Boyang, which is like fan fiction of 1984. Very boring. And then Liu Cixin's writing is just so incredibly dull. I'll read to you a passage if you've not read him, lest you imagine that I'm just merely being in high dudgeon. Jing Ke pointed to the formation and began to explain. Your Majesty, we have named this formation Qin 1. Look, there in the center is the central processing subformation, the core calculating component, made up of the best divisions of your army. By referencing this diagram, you can locate the adding subformations, quick storage subformations, and stack memory subformation. The part around it that looks highly regular is the memory subformation. When we built that part, we found that we didn't have enough soldiers, but luckily the work done by the elements in this component is the simplest, so we train each soldier to hold more colored flags. Each man can now complete this work that initially required 20 men. This allowed us to increase the memory capacity to meet the minimum requirements for running the calculating procedure for the circular ratio. Big recommend on the book generally. I think definitely skip the Liu Cixin stories. Credit to Ken Liu for putting this book out, which is first in, or it had a follow-up book, I guess I will say. I don't remember the name of it, I'll put it here. I followed up immediately with Waist Tide by Chen Qiufan, which was published 2013, set on an island in China that receives e-waste, post-consumer waste from around the world, reprocesses it into consumer goods to be sold back overseas, and then used, consumed, and then sent back to this trash island for processing. The island is ruled by 3 warring families of industrialists who employ people from inland China, these internal migrants within China, underpays them, overworks them, works them in slave-like conditions where they're burning plastic and, knee deep in hazardous waste and living in slums. One of the protagonists is a guy in his early 20s who spent his childhood on the island and then went to the United States to get a college degree, and then has come back to try to broker a trade agreement between these families on the island and an American interest represented by this other protagonist guy who is a potentially shady character. I really love the first half of the book. The second half gets into territory where there's a mech for some reason, and it just turns into this action movie. It feels like reading Ghost in the Shell pastiche or something. The first half is great. It's like Upton Sinclair writing cyberpunk. I think it is incredibly powerful. I think that this is just as much an example of the genre of social realism as it is an example of cyberpunk, and I think that's why I like Chen Qiufan so much, is because it's a wedding of those two things. The payoff in Waist Tide is a letdown for how great the first half is. That includes also a lot of discussion of linguistics and culture. I also remember some interesting tension between the sense of Chinese national identity being simultaneously both resentful at having functioned as this manufacturing base for much of the rest of the world in this sort of like exploited position, while also being at the forefront of technological innovation and emerging as a major, possibly the major world power. That's my impression as an American sitting on a metal folding chair in the middle of a prairie, not being an expert in Chinese politics or culture by any even remote stretch of the imagination. That's the message that I got from it. I think absolutely worth reading. Be warned, it is quite violent, especially later in the book. I think that it just becomes rather uninteresting, does not deliver on the potential of the first part of the book, which I think is amazing. Chen Qiufan is somebody to be aware of and somebody who I am going to seek out work from where I can. Then after that, I read the first 3 novels that Guin published, the original Hainish cycle or Hainish trilogy consisting of Ricannon's World, Planet of Exile, and City of Illusions. This is sometimes found in omnibus form called the Hainish something. There was a book club edition of it. I found that a couple of times, and there's also a contemporary trade paperback or 2. I've seen it around these parts, not these parts, but it is gettable and it's still in print, and I think that you should get it. It is worth seeking out. What an incredibly underrated series of books this is. Duh, it's Ursula Le Guin, one of the most famous science fiction writers of history, but even so, this stuff is overshadowed by most of the rest of what she wrote, with a couple of exceptions, books that nobody ever talks about ever. The one with the corn lady on the front that comes to mind. She has some enough titles that are poorly enough known that I continue to see books from her that I've never heard of before, but way overshadowed by the Earthsea books, way overshadowed by the other later, longer, more Baroque Hainish books like Left Hand of Darkness and Dispossessed. I think that Le Guin is such a good writer that even though she is one of the most celebrated, decorated, well-known, and still widely read of these older science fiction authors from this time period, one of the still most broadly read new wavers, I still think that she is generally underappreciated somehow. And these books are remarkable for a bunch of reasons. Probably the big one is the fact that Le Guin just showed up Le Guin. The first 2 are the best. I like City of Illusion, but I don't love it. I love the middle one, Planet of Exile, and I really like Ricannon's World. Ricannon's World is a thinly veiled Tolkien high fantasy given a science fictional coat of paint. Feels actually a lot like the Chai books from Jack Vance. City of Illusion feels quite Vancian as well. It's about a mystery guy that shows up at the outskirts of this village in the woods in a distant Earth future, and he has yellow eyes with enormous pupils, and nobody knows if he's an alien or not, and he has to go on a picaresque journey to discover You know, he has to go live, laugh, love out in the world and figure out who he is, what his purpose is, whatever. That one's good. Planet of Exile, the middle one, is making me make this face. It's so goddamn good. Good to the point where I don't get why or how it could be obscure. I think all three should be read, period, and all three should be read together and should be read as a coherent sort of statement. They don't share characters, but there is bridging between the three of them, and all three books taken in total tell a very interesting kind of story. I think Le Guin may have been doing something that's like a deconstruction of Golden Age science fiction or of space opera, because there's this big intergalactic war thing happening in the background that would have been the main focus of pretty much any other writer of her period in telling this kind of science fiction story, these grand sweeping epic tales of civilizations rising and falling. All of that is backgrounded. All of the actual action, all the dogfighting, all the main military campaigning, all the real intrigue, all the explosions, they're all in the distant background, very soft focus. And foregrounded are these cultural and sociological conflicts and internal sort of moral struggles of the characters. And I think the omission of all the big plot stuff is important. I think that that's part of what she's doing. Rocannon's world is very good. It is not as serious as the middle book, nor is the third book. Planet of Exile is really the big recommend here. It's like Game of Thrones or Heliconia Spring, but in this tiny little, almost novella length, just heat-seeking missile of a novel. It's about two neighboring communities of human. One of them is descended from a stranded Hainish mission, I think 2 or 3 generations removed, and they're losing grip on their technological advantage over their quote-unquote barbarian neighbors, living as nomads and hunter-gatherers. And on this planet, just like in Game of Thrones and just like in Heliconia Spring, the seasons work on a multi-decade timeline. Winter is coming, and the barbarians are preparing for a possible onslaught of an army of creatures advancing from the frozen north. The Haines and the barbarians have never faced a threat at this scale, and will they be able to overcome their mutual enmity and distrust built over the years to meet the challenge head on? Primary among Le Guin's virtues to me is her ability to write morally ambiguous cultures and individuals in such a way where there are still dividing lines. There are still good guys and bad guys, but realistically so. And I think also she is responsible for the best utopian science fiction ever written, not just Dispossessed, but this as well. I think that this is like a very bloody bare knuckles kind of plea for human solidarity and cultural understanding and multiculturalism. And I think that that kind of stuff is important. It becomes more and more important the more people are happy to roll their eyes at terms like multiculturalism and jack themselves off over how naive a concept it is. I think that this is a depiction of a brokering of mutual cultural compromise that is not naive, that is perfectly well aware of the fact that there are internal biases and bigotries and structural obstacles to that kind of a solidarity that are endemic to every culture. And Planet of Exile is a dark book. It's a difficult and violent book. And I think it's worth taking as seriously as something like The Dispossessed, which gets a lot of the credit, which itself I think is kind of overshadowed by Left Hand of Darkness, but Planet of Exile I think is up there with those two. And I think that it's maybe even more accessible because of its brevity, because it doesn't do this long sociological strolling around of those other books. This is Le Guin writing in her sword and sorcery mode. Le Guin is also the kind of writer where you read her and you just think you have to be, you can't learn this. Like this is just Le Guin. I just love her. I just think that science fiction is so much better off for her having written it. And I hope that this original trilogy of novels circles back around and gets re-included in the canon of the major Le Guin works. It's kind of there, but it isn't. Like people talk about it in this context of it being a throat clearing for her. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think that she arrived confident and mature as a writer with Rickanon's world, and the growing pains are there, but it's interestingly not, in my eyes, until the third book, until City of Illusions, where you can see her stretching and kind of putting on the tweed jacket of Left Hand of Darkness and Dispossessed. In that book, I think doesn't work as coherently as the other two. The first one is a little bit more frivolous, but fun, like a really great planetary romance. Obviously, the second one is the shit. City of Illusions feels a little bit like a Taoist Shadow of the Torturer or something. I just didn't carry much with me from that book in the way that I did, certainly City of Illusions, or not City of Illusions, Planet of Exile. Anyway, read them. Find the omnibus or whatever. Find it in whatever way you can and read them. I think it's totally worth it. And then I read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson on the plane going to Manila, which I thought was good. I don't have a ton to say about it, actually. I selected it because I happen to have it loaded on my Kindle already. It's surprisingly brutal. It's surprisingly graphic. It is surprisingly horny. It's about a guy trapped in his house in suburban Glendale, I think. Every night, a mob of vampires shows up to try to kill him. He is the last remaining human, as far as he knows, and he's just kind of biding his time, having found a way to jury-rig a kind of security for himself by hanging garlic over all the doors, and I think he has some other security system or something. And he's been doing experiments inside the house to try to figure out the how and why of vampire biology and why certain things are damaging to them, like garlic. And it's apparently the first book, or one of the first books, to attempt to furnish scientific explanations for the vampire mythology of, you know, why would they be allergic to garlic or whatever. And this is something that Peter Watts does. I think the greater effect in Blind Sight. But my memory is the main chunk of the plot is just this guy being incredibly sexually frustrated in his house because all the women are vampires. And I put off reading this book for a long time, despite its high profile, because I thought that I knew what the ending would be, having seen the Will Smith movie, and maybe I'm misremembering that, but I feel like the ending in this is a little bit different and a little bit better. But overall, I don't know, I wasn't like super, I don't have strong feelings about it. It was pretty good. I would give it like a 7 out of 10. I think that it's, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it was written in the 1950s. I do remember finding it a little bit overwrought, a little bit overdramatic, a little bit Avenged Sevenfold. But it worked for my intended purpose, which was to have something to do for a couple hours while on a plane. That's probably damning it with faint praise, but I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. I thought it was fine. It was like reading a horror movie. I don't have a whole lot else to say about it, unfortunately, but I guess it's worth reading. So the big news is I am not traveling anymore, at least not long term. I'm not doing the digital nomadism for the foreseeable. I have put down a deposit on an apartment for a bunch of reasons. I don't know, maybe at some point I'll do a video about it. Long story short, there's just a few things in life that I really want to focus on. One of them is these videos. One of them is just work, of just being in the mental space of not being distracted, not having to deal with like the logistical issues of filming outdoors while traveling, which is an enormous challenge, it turns out. But for now, I'm content, more than content, just to have somewhere to put bookshelves up and somewhere to hang my Instant Pot, you know, hang my hat, but it's an Instant Pot, not that I hang one. You can't hang an Instant Pot, Matt. So anyway, that is coming down the pipe. There are a bunch of Patreon videos of books that I have not yet gotten to reviewing here on YouTube. It's $5 a month. There's over 200 videos. I upload there all the time. I do individual book reviews there as opposed to these clustered book reviews on YouTube. And I review them typically within a few hours or within a day of having finished the book. So sometimes I'm quite animated. My thoughts are a little bit fresher. And I think that it's a good value proposition for $5. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon here on the old Punishment Prairie, or maybe in my new apartment. All right, thanks for watching.